Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Taking Plan Designs to New Heights. I have just a few announcements. For those of you who are requesting credit, please note that to receive CE credit, you must remain logged into the video portion of the webinar for the entire program. Logging into the audio portion only is not sufficient for CE credit. Continuing education credits are being offered for the following designations: CFP, CIMA, CPWA, CIMC, RMA, CPE, and SHRM. Also, at the end of the webinar, we would like to request that all attendees fill out the evaluation form that will pop up. If you have any questions during the presentation, please submit them through the question box. At the end of the webinar, we'll answer as many questions as we can, but we want to be respectful of your schedule and end on time. If we don't get to your question today, we will follow up with you afterwards. Tomorrow, you will receive an email with a link to replay today's broadcast. Now let's get started. Our instructor today is Mary Reed, Pentegra's National Director of Pension and Protection Planning. Mary is a specialist in qualified tax advantage strategies for small business owners. She helps those business owners turn a good year into a great year by keeping more of what they have earned. Mary, I will turn this over to you to start talking practical and tactical actions.
All right, thank you very much. We'll get started here. All right, so our learning objectives for today, right, we're going to talk about plan design. We'll talk about the importance of that plan design process because that's where it starts in setting up a plan for the employer, and talk about why the planning and the design is important and why it has been de-emphasized in recent years in the qualified plan space. Hopefully identify some strategies to help ascertain plan sponsor objectives so you can know and share with us how we should design that plan to meet those objectives. Understand how to meet those objectives by using plan design, and then also how to apply some specific design options that we'll talk about through the WebEx. So let's start with the plan design process. Where does it start? So the goals of plan design when we meet with an employer is we want to design a plan that meets their needs. Simple as that, meets their objectives, that it achieves that. If we don't have a discussion with that employer about what those objectives are, how can we design a plan to meet them or know that the plan we present to them will meet them? So that's an important part of the process. We want to help them secure tax advantages. That's what qualified plans do, right? They're tax advantage tools for both the sponsor and the participants. And along those lines, to make sure that that plan is designed to maximize contributions in a way that the sponsor wants, whether that's through salary deferrals or through employer contributions. This is a source of retirement income, obviously, for everybody involved. And that sometimes that's part of the design, is the objective here to accumulate some particular target of money for retirement. That may affect the type of plan that we suggest. And also we want to make sure that plan sponsors understand and are able to fulfill their fiduciary responsibilities. They are fiduciaries when they create a plan for their employees. And so they need to be aware of what their fiduciary roles are and what that entails to make sure that they know what the expectations are and are able to do that. This has kind of become a lost art, it seems. I've been doing qualified plans for businesses for over 40 years. Yeah, that's a long time. And as the market has shifted, when we're doing defined benefit plans or cash balance plans or those kinds of plans, it's all about the design of the plan. But as 401k kind of took over the world, 401ks hit the stage in 1981 and have really taken over the world for a lot of companies in the retirement plan space. And as other, financial vendors have gone in, they really become kind of cookie cutter in a lot of ways. And there's nothing wrong with cookie cutter per se, but what it means is we're not custom designing those plans to meet specific objectives that certain employers have. And so there's an opportunity here when we start to talk plan design with those business owners to really fine tune that plan to what they need it to do and what they want it to do. A lot of employers are unaware that that's even an option because no one has talked to them from that perspective. They're coming in with the plain vanilla 401k plan from the payroll provider or from the financial provider, and and not even discussing, how we could change this or tweak this or whatever, which creates an opportunity for those of us who do want to have those conversations with employers. And all of these things that we're going to talk about today, we could do on pre-approved plans. We don't have to get into expensive custom documents. We can do this right in the pre-approved kind of plan documents that we already work with. The options are already in there. It's just a matter of taking advantage of them. So the platform providers and third-party administrators, increasingly don't focus on design, and some of it has to do with cost and their profit margins. They don't want to spend a lot of time on the upfront end of doing custom plan design. It takes time, it takes work. And so it's less costly to offer these kind of plain vanilla programs and keep the expenses down. It can be done usually with a simple checklist sitting with that employer, standard provisions, it defaults to standard provisions, and it makes it very easy to do. And easy is good because otherwise less employers would have plans because the more complicated it gets, the harder it is to do them. So it has its place, but especially as companies get larger or more successful, they may want to look at more customized options. We also, since we've had the safe harbor plans have arrived on the scene, they've been with us for a long time now. They are the default design for a lot of, especially smaller 401k plans. And there is some design flexibility there, but not a lot. So that kind of pushes everything to that plain vanilla side as well. All right, so we're talking about plan design as a differentiator. And the reason we're talking about plan design today is exactly this. This can differentiate you in the marketplace. There's a big difference between going into an employer and giving them just the plain vanilla plan and going in and saying, we want to design a plan that meets your objectives, that meets your needs, and we'll custom design that plan to do that for you. That's a really valuable offering to bring to somebody. Just think, if you went into for ice cream place and all you got was plain vanilla because they didn't give you a choice. Well, what if I want, Rocky Road? We can offer them Rocky Road. So this will better align, the idea here is better align with that employer's objectives and make the plan work better for them. So not only will it work better for them today, but it will continue to work for them. And we can do this right on the documents that are available. As I said, you don't have to get into pricey custom documents to do this. These features are in volume submitter documents that are available that get used all the time. So it doesn't have to increase the expense of doing the plan, just having a plan that's more efficient and better in the long run. So here's our first polling question. So I will stop for the question.
The polling question should now appear on your screen. True or false, pre-approved plans are flexible and can satisfy most sponsors' needs and objectives. The poll will appear on your screen for another few seconds for anyone who's yet to select your answer. Poll is now closed. The correct answer was A, true. Mary, you may continue.
All right, thank you. All right, so let's talk about how we start to actually put that to work and design a plan for someone. So kind of in simple steps here, first we want to identify what that business owner's goals and objectives are. That's a conversation of what their objectives are. We will then design a plan around those objectives, then pick a document format that we'll use to implement that plan. That's really in the installation process. I would reverse these. I would say, we identify the plan sponsors and goals, and then we design a plan to meet those goals. We want to make sure that everybody understands those design options, present them to the client, and then from what's offered, the client can select the options that they like that fulfill their goals and objectives. We are then going to execute that plan by writing it on a plan document. So going back to step 2, pick the document format, that's really a behind the scenes job. That's not really a discussion with the employer. That's kind of a behind the scenes with the TPA to make sure that the features that we're showing and the design we're showing can be written on the document that we want to use. And then of course, reevaluate. That's an ongoing process. Plans should always be evaluated periodically. They are living, breathing things. They don't stand still, nor does the employer stand still. So here's some common objectives. So maybe that employer wants to increase or maybe redirect contributions to select people. So let's say the sponsor wants certain employees or groups to receive additional contributions over other employees. Well, that's not going to happen in a plain vanilla design, but we can design that into a custom plan. Additional contributions and deferral opportunities, they just want to be able to put in more. Particularly the highly compensated want to defer more. So if we're in a 401k plan, the salary deferrals for those highly compensated employees are limited by what the rank and file employees do, unless we make that plan safe harbor, or we take other steps to augment the testing to allow those highly compensated employees to max out their contributions. Eliminate compliance test failures. This is a big one. Nobody wants to deal with failures and get refunds sometimes of over contributions. So that also comes into the design to make sure that the design for that group will work and that will not be occurring. Cost containment, these plans cost money to operate, and employers want to make sure that they're not setting themselves up for extreme expenses. So that can come into how we design the plan too. A simpler plan design will be less expensive to administer than a much more complex one. Recruitment, sponsors want to use the plan to attract and retain targeted employees. Well, what kind of demographics are they trying to target? What do those employees expect from that plan? And if the expectations don't align with the offering, and that's kind of an industry standard, that could be a problem. And of course, simplification. Plan sponsors want this to be as easy and simplified as possible, so it's streamlined. They don't run into headaches, testing headaches, failure headaches, those kinds of things. Again, by having the right plan design in place, it will make sure or help ensure that that plan runs smoothly and is attractive for that company and for those employees. So to stimulate the plan's sponsor's thought process, what can you ask them? What can you do to drive that conversation? Simple one, what would you like your plan to do for you? If they have an existing plan, ask them what do they like about it and what don't they like about it. Usually they're pretty quick to tell you what they don't like about it and what they might like to change. On a per participant basis, looking at the individual level, what contribution levels do they want? What do they want to be able to do maximum contributions, or is that too rich for them? Maybe they don't need that. What kind of goals are they looking for individuals in the plan to benefit from? Do you want the employees to contribute towards their retirement? Now, we've been talking about 401k, and mostly today we will talk about 401k because so many of the plans that are established out there are 401k plans, but there's a whole other world of qualified plans. There are all kinds of defined benefit plans. There are cash balance plans. There are profit sharing plans. Those are all employer funded, not employee funded. The only plan where we have employee funding is a 401k. So do they want that feature? They want those, employees actively participating in the plan. This is always an interesting one. Are there particular employees you want to include or exclude from the plan? It's not that unusual that we find employers who have some particular employees they may not want in the plan. Have you had problems with compliance testing if you already have a plan? What do those problems look like? Let's address that and try to get those corrected. And what about the investment of the funds in the plan? Are your employees up to doing that on their own? Are they savvy about it? Do they need education? How much education do they need? Or do you feel that your employee group really doesn't have that skill set and this should all be investment directed by the plan trustee? Those are valid questions to ask that will drive us to what the features in that plan should be. Now, talking about documents, I keep referring back that documents, we don't need to go to a custom document. Modern plan documents are very flexible, and they have a variety of provisions available in them. So it's a matter of selecting which provisions we want to use in that document that will align with that plan sponsor's goals and objectives. There may be pros and cons, certainly, to different features and some trade-offs. You know, and there are elective provisions. There are some things that are mandatory in plans that, you know, we can't, for example, make, you know, the eligibility in the plan is that you have to work there for 5 years. Not an option, right? That's controlled by regulation. But, you know, are we going to offer in-service withdrawals? That's a choice for the employer. So some things are elective, and those are things that employers think about. And when you ask the questions, they do tend to think about it. I find one that comes up a lot in 401k plans is, do you want plan loans in your plan? Some employers will say absolutely yes, and other employers will say no. No, because if I do, then the employees are going to take that money out and spend it. I don't want them to do that. This is for their retirement. So there are all those kinds of questions. If they have an existing plan, we can amend it to make changes if they've changed what those objectives are, or we've now clarified them. And certainly if it's new plan, we write it in the way they want it. So again, all about aligning with what their objectives are. It's our job to know what provisions in the plan document will do that. In the conversation where we have to have an understanding, what is a loan provision? What is a hardship withdrawal? What is an early retirement date? And what does that mean? What are in-plan Roth conversions? Those kind of conversations, so we can ask the questions to really guide that employer. Do you want this in your plan? Here's the pros, here's the cons. Do you really want this in your plan? So on a broad basis, no matter what we choose, we always have to keep in mind that we have to pass testing. Right? All plans have to pass the rules. So on a group basis, that's kind of on the overall basis, the plan has to meet non-discrimination testing, as well as, you know, coverage rules, non-discrimination, equal rights and benefits and features for everybody, all those kinds of tests. There will be discrimination testing between the highly compensated and the non-highly compensated to make sure we're not harming those non-highly compensated employees. So that all happens on a plan level basis. And then, of course, on the individual level, we have individual limitations on benefits and how much someone can have or how much someone can put away. And so that testing gets done on the individual level. And this is where sometimes we have a plan. Let's think about a typical 401k plan where we're passing on the group level, but when we get down to the individual level, the plan has failed that ADP testing, so the highly compensated can't keep in the plan what they've deferred. They have to take some of it back. There's a passage at the group level, but a failure at the individual level. We want to make sure we're passing on both levels. So once we've figured out the type of plan, right? It's not just the features in the plan, but what type of plan are we going to do here? It's not always a 401k. Maybe it is a 401k and a cash balance plan. We don't know, so in the design process, we have to narrow it down as to what type of plan is best for this employer. And then within that type, what are the best features to have? And then we have to make sure that the document accurately reflects that and that it's correct. And when it's signed, we have signed, executed, created that legal plan document that controls the plan that has in it what that employer wanted. The document does rule. The document language will rule. If it was unintentional, it's still in the document and that will rule. Plans should be reviewed, in my opinion, at least annually. Businesses change, employee groups change, budgets change, cash flow changes. So it's important to reevaluate with the employer every year. The plan design is still serving their needs. The contributions called for is still meeting their budget needs. The plan is operating in compliance. There haven't been any major changes in the business. They haven't bought another company. All those kinds of things should be addressed, should be reviewed, hopefully annually, to make sure that that company is still getting the plan that they need and that they want and that it's still working for them. If changes occur, that's fine. We can always amend a plan. Now we can go forward. We can't go backwards. We can't take away somebody's benefit, but we can always amend forward. And that's not a difficult process. It's just, takes a board resolution if they're a corporation. We write a plan amendment. They sign the plan amendment. Notification of that change given to all the employers of the employees with the summary plan description. And so it's not a difficult process. It's just, part of the process that has to be done to keep that plan current and operating the way that they want. And it's not something to shy away from. It's okay to do amendments. All right, we'll take our next polling question.
The polling question should now appear on your screen. What is the first step in the plan design process? A, understand plan design options. B, pick the document format. C, identify the plan sponsor's goals and objectives. Or D, select design options. This poll will be available for another few seconds for anyone who has yet to select an answer. Poll is now closed. The correct answer was C. Mary, you may continue.
All right, thank you. All right, so let's look at some samples of how things might change. So let's say here the sponsor's objective is to allow the highly compensated employees to defer more than they've been able to in their plan. They want to increase it. So a solution to that issue might be to turn the plan into a safe harbor, which will guarantee that the highly compensated employees can defer the maximum, regardless of what the other employees do. Simple change. It would require a plan amendment, but it would be very simple and to execute, and that would meet the objective of the sponsor here. So if they didn't do that, right, if the plan is not a safe harbor, we have to pass this ADP test, the actual deferral percentage test. And what that test says is that the amount that the highly compensated can defer is controlled by what the rank and file employees defer. And so in our example here, we have 4 non-highly compensated employees. 2 of them are not deferring at all. 1 is doing 2% and 1 is doing 6%. So it becomes an average for the group. We have 8% being deferred employees to take the average of that. So that's going to limit the maximum highly compensated deferral to 4% of pay. So you can imagine if you have a highly compensated employee and they're trying to maximize their deferrals, that's going to be a very small amount that they're able to do. If we amend to a safe harbor, it takes away that ADP test. It goes away. And so now that highly compensated employee can automatically defer the maximum each year, whatever that cost of living number is. Now, it does the flip side of this. It's never, a simple thing, pure 100% one way. If we go to safe harbor, the employer is now committing to make a certain contribution to that plan. That can take the form of a match or a flat percent, all defined by regulation, but it will put an employer on a hook to make that safe harbor contribution. So the discussion here is not as simple as, well, let's make your plan a safe harbor. The plan discussion is, well, we can make your plan a safe harbor, and here's the cost to you in doing that. Is that worth it to you? Now, I know in this presentation, we're not going to talk about auto enrollment. That's a whole topic unto itself. But another way to go here maybe would be to switch a plan to auto enrollment. Now, with the Secure Act, new plans are required to have auto enrollment. Only businesses less than 3 years old don't have to do it, but a lot of plans have to go to existing plans, and new plans will be on auto enrollment. That increases the level of participation for the employees. Now, will that guarantee a highly compensated can still do the maximum? No, it will not. And they probably still won't be able to with an automatic enrollment. But if they wanted an adjustment somewhere in between, auto enrollment would be another option to talk about to increase that deferral percentage from those rank and file employees. So going back to the safe harbor, right? So the pros here are we get rid of that ADP testing. And so now our highly compensated can automatically defer the maximum, anybody who wants to. It simplifies the testing on the plan, and it eliminates those failures of having deferred too much. We can't have that failure now. The expense, the employer now has to make contributions that are required. There is additional reporting and disclosure that has to be given to the employees. And for those plans who may allow for after-tax employee contributions as well, they're not covered by this safe harbor rule. That would still have to pass separately. All right, so let's look at another objective. Now we have the matching contributions, but only for certain groups of employees. They don't want to do it for everybody. So if you have a plain vanilla 401k and you have a matching formula in there, probably everybody's getting the same match. But if we go to a custom design, we can give different matching rates to different classes of employees. That would be a plan document amendment to do that, but that's certainly allowable. We can have multiple matching formulas in that same plan. So, a significant employee turnover in department here that they're showing. Let's say our current formula is a 50% match up to 6%. So, yes, the good thing is it'll probably encourage employees to defer 6%. Not everybody will, but it is encouragement. But it doesn't get them past 6%. So maybe now you're targeting your employees are deferring 6%, but that's still not going to let your highly compensated defer more. And maybe you need an employee retention tool here where your highly paid employees or your longer term employees, you want to reward them more for staying. So we could put multiple benefit formulas in here where we give some employees that we choose to 100% match up to 10% compensation, for example. And maybe by doing that, we're able to increase our employee retention because now they have a very generous program that they get rewarded for being around. It helps our ACP test because we've raised the averages. So it's helping our overall testing. And it's become a way for this employer to reward a select group of employees. So the approach, or we can have targeted groups, right? And we can have multiple groups. It doesn't have to be two. We can have multiple groups and target specific matching contributions for each group that meets that sponsor's goals. The cons are it will be a more complex plan design, so it can drive up administration costs. And of course, it would require the employer to be contributing more to anybody that they've increased that match for. So again, nothing's purely black and white. It's a discussion of pros and cons, and which is the better and more important feature for the employer. So let's look at this objective. They want the HCEs, the highly compensated, to make deferrals by improving that ADP test. They don't want to go to a safe harbor, but they still want to increase what those highly compensated can defer. Now we get into some tricky designs where we can exclude some people from the plan. Just because you're an employee doesn't necessarily make you a plan participant. First of all, you have to meet age and service eligibility requirements to come in the plan. Typically, it would be 1 year of service in which you work 1,000 hours and that you're 21 years old. However, now that you meet the eligibility, it doesn't mean we have to let you in the plan either. We can still exclude employees from the plan. We have to pass what's called participation tests. We can't exclude everybody, but we can exclude certain percentages of employees. So if some of those rank and file employees, maybe that's a way to bring our ADP test up to help those highly compensated employees. So here's a little example. We have a shipping department employee and they have low deferrals there. They feel they can't afford to put it in. And so our deferral percentage is only 2% of pay. So now our highly compensated are limited to 4% of pay. What if we amended that plan to eliminate that department maybe that's a particularly low deferring department in the company, but we have other employees to company who defer more. And now when we just look at those other companies, now we have a deferral of 5% instead of 2%. And now our highly compensated can do 7% of pay instead of 4% of pay under the testing. Now, we can't just randomly exclude large numbers of employees. Basically, we have to cover whatever percentage of the highly compensated employees we're covering. We have to cover 70% of that percentage. So if we have all our highly compensated employees who are eligible in the plan, that's 100%. So we have to cover at least 70% of our eligible non-highly compensated employees. So if I had 2 highly compensated employees and 10 non-highly compensated employees, my 2 highly compensated could be in, and I could exclude 3 of my 10 rank and file employees. I can do that by job classification and other ways. I can't do it by age or sex or those kind of things, but I can do it by other non-discriminatory means. The test goes even further because it's a percentage of percentage test. If in my example here I had 2 highly compensated employees and one of them is out of the plan, I'm only covering 50% of my employees. Now I only have to cover 70% of 50%. That's only 3.5 employees. Now I cannot cover a half employee, so I'd have to cover 4, but now I'm only having to cover 4 out of my 10. Maybe that helps me get past my ACP test. So the pros here of taking this strategy is we can improve our testing, hopefully, to help get to the goal of allowing our highly paid employees to put in more. The negative is these employees will know that there is a plan that they are not in. And that could be a pretty morale dropping factor at the employer because they will know there is a plan that they are excluded from. And that can be a problem at some employers. Some fine, but it could be a challenge. So you have to take that into consideration. All right, next polling question.
The polling question should now appear on your screen. Which of the following is true regarding a safe harbor 401k plan? A, safe harbor design plans allowed HCEs to maximize deferrals. B, the ADP test is deemed to be satisfied. C, employer contributions are required. D, all of the above. Or E, A and B only. This poll will be available for another few seconds for anyone who has yet to select an answer. Poll is now closed. The correct answer was B, all of the above. Mary, you may continue.
All right, thank you. All right, so let's look at some more possible profiles. So here, the sponsor's main objective is to reduce their costs through exclusions. Again, if there are less people in the plan, it will cost less money to administer. So here again, they could take an approach of excluding perhaps some of the HCEs, which would allow them to exclude additional non-highly compensated employees. But again, people will know there is a plan that they are not in. So let's look how this might play out in an example. Here we have an example. We have 2 highly compensated partners, 3 highly compensated associates, 10 non-highly compensated administration staff, 6 non-highly compensated paralegals, and 4 non-highly compensated investigators. Sounds like a law firm to me. So if we have everybody in the plan, we've got 10, 20, 25 people in this plan. Are highly compensated. We have many more non-highly compensated than highly compensated. So depending on how much they're actually deferring, we'll control what those highly compensated employees can do. And we're paying for 25 participants. So if the plan were changed so that we excluded all the highly compensated employees, it's an interesting rule that if we have a plan that does not have both highly compensated and non-highly compensated employees, but only has non-highly compensated employees, we can get much more discriminatory in the plan and do a lot of things that we wouldn't be able to do if we had any highly compensated employees. So that's what we're looking at here. What if we excluded all those highly compensated employees? Then we could, if we wanted to, also exclude a bunch of those other employees and maybe leave only the paralegals in the plan if we wanted to. Now that would kind of be a rather unusual plan design, but we could. Maybe a more common plan design might be that we exclude those highly compensated employees and we do non-qualified deferred compensation, some kind of non-qualified planning for them to give them benefits and leave just the remaining rank and file employees in the plan, and that would lower our costs for the plan. If we went this route, this would ensure, because we get rid of those highly compensated employees, that we are passing our 410 coverage testing and that ADP and ACP testing here because we only have rank and file employees. Seems like a really drastic move, but there are places where this can fit. And we're not going to ignore those highly compensated employees. We're going to treat them and reward them in some other way that may be more effective and more efficient than doing it through the 401k. So obviously the pros here is if we can do this and meet the objectives that the employer has voiced and get that cost reduced on that 401k and also take away that hindrance on those highly compensated being limited as to what they can defer, then that's good. The cons are we do have some other testing issues we have to wrestle with here, and that dissatisfaction of those highly compensated employees being excluded. That's what I'm saying. Typically in the real world, if you took the approach, you would do something individualized for those highly compensated employees that we have just excluded. All right, so let's look at another one. This employer wants to provide additional matching contributions, again, only to certain non-highly compensated employees, and they'd like to simplify the testing. So here, we could exclude those highly compensated employees from the plan, perhaps entirely, or we could just exclude them from matching and provide additional matching contributions to the select non-highly compensated employees that they want to. So in our example here, if we have 10 highly compensated and 50 non-highly compensated managers and 150 assistant managers and 700 other employees, obviously the non-highly compensated employees make up by far the majority here. We only have 10 highly compensated compared to 900 other employees. If we amended this plan and excluded the highly compensated employees, we would take away that expense for them. Again, this employer might choose to do something outside of the plan for those highly compensated employees. Now we could give the managers a 100% match up to 10%, give the assistant managers a 50% match up to 10%, and everybody else gets 25% up to 10%. So we've tiered that match in a way that the employer feels matches the way their employees are tiered. Because we got all the highly compensated out of the test, we don't have some of the testing anymore. We've gotten rid of the ADP and ACP testing, and we can have these different matching rates for our rank and file employees and not have to worry about some of the testing concerns. As I've said already, and the employer could satisfy the highly compensated employees by putting them in some kind of a non-qualified arrangement. And in those arrangements, the employer can do anything they want and then treat each person individually without the restrictions of having to pass the requirements and the rules and the non-discrimination testing of including them in the qualified plan. So the pros here, the non-highly compensated employees, some of them are going to get more contribution. It's a way to reward those employees and hopefully keep them, retain them. And so that's a big benefit for the employees that are still going to be in the plan, and simplify testing from the employer standpoint in terms of expenses of operating that plan by removing those highly compensated. Now, if what the employer would give up if they take those highly compensated out and do something for them on a non-qualified basis, non-qualified plans are not deductible until the benefits are paid. And so they would lose the current deduction that they were currently receiving for providing benefits to those employees. And I suppose you could have some dissatisfaction. There could be a little rumbling from the employees of the ones who are getting a 25% match versus those getting 100%. But if it matches kind of the hierarchy of the company, sometimes it's based upon job position, Sometimes it's based upon longevity, so that it makes sense in that work environment. Then you could hopefully avoid those kinds of complaints and conflicts. Here's an employer that likes to make regular Roth IRA contributions through conversions of plan assets. So we can allow after-tax contributions and in-service distributions. Or we could have a Roth provision for the salary deferrals in the plan as well. Here, we could allow after-tax, and then they can just convert that amount, or it could be an additional amount on top of Roth deferrals that they want to convert to Roth. Our example here, we have one highly compensated and one non-highly compensated employee. This is a safe harbor 401k with a 3% fail-safe contribution. That highly compensated employee cannot do a Roth IRA. They make too much money for the Roth IRA. They can make Roth salary deferrals and Roth conversions, but they cannot have a Roth IRA. So if we allow the plan to have additional after-tax contributions from employees, that highly compensated can make an additional $20,000 of after-tax contribution, then take an in-service distribution, take it out and convert it to a Roth. Or conversely, we might amend the plan to allow for in-service or in-plan Roth conversions. It could be done either way. Now, for that $20,000 that highly compensated wants to defer, we do have to pass discrimination testing on that. And so in reality, they may or may not be able to do it. We have to look at the specifics of that in particular employer, because there is testing that's not covered by the safe harbor. But there are some ways to pass that testing if the employee themselves is not deferring as much with what are called QNECs, qualified non-elective contributions. Those are employer contributions made for that employee that are immediately vested and account in the test and can help us get through the test. It may be worth it to this employer to make those additional non-QNECs for the employees in order to put their additional $20,000 in to convert to a Roth. So the pros here is that highly compensated can make the significant after-tax contributions and convert them to the Roth that they want. But the downside is there may be that added expense of making that fully vested contribution for that employee to get past the testing. And there's some more complexity on the administration of this plan. There's more testing that has to be done, so there could be more. Next polling question.
The polling question should now appear on your screen. Which plan design option allows HCEs to defer more into the plan without testing? A, a safe harbor plan. B, a plan with employer contributions. C, a plan that allows for in-service distributions. Or D, a plan with matching contributions. Poll will remain open for a few more seconds for anyone who's yet to select an answer. The poll is now closed. The correct answer was A, a safe harbor plan. Mary, you may continue.
Thank you. All right, so let's just kind of get out of the weeds for a minute and just refresh ourselves on what are some of the key points here. Ideal plan design helps ensure that the plan meets that sponsor's goals and objectives. That is our priority here. A lot of employers are not getting to have these conversations because there are not a lot of people around equipped to talk with them at this level and from this perspective. So there's tremendous opportunity out there, both for existing plans and to create new plans with business owners that advisors and consultants can take advantage of and have those conversations with business owners. And the way our pre-approved documents are today, we have the flexibility in those documents to accommodate most of what we want. And it's, fairly easy to create a process to move through here, initial conversation with the owner, identify their objectives and their goals, bring those back within the rules. We will help design a plan that meets those objectives and goals, bring that back and present it to that employer, see how they like that design. What do they like? What do they not like? What met their objectives? Maybe they changed their mind or they weren't clear. We redesign it until it looks like what that employer wants and what it wants them to do. And then we can put that plan into effect on a pre-approved plan document. Now, before we get to questions, I just want to talk about a couple of additional things with plan design that weren't in the slides. So we've really been, all the examples were on 401k plans, but as I said, there are a lot of other plan types out there. So I would just want to talk about some of the other plan design discussions to have with employers. So if you're talking to an employer and they have a 401k plan, so let's say, so likely upfront or they're thinking about putting one of the top topics probably that's going to come up is about maximizing the salary deferral opportunity for the owner and other highly compensated employees. And so that's where we talk about some of the examples we just looked at, ways to help accomplish that, whether it's safe harbor or doing a QNEC and those kinds of things. Now, keep in mind the world is changing now that we have auto enrollment in plans. Automatic enrollment is required on most new 401k plans of companies with more than 10 lives. And so we will automatically go to auto enrollment. Typically, the initial automatic deferral percentage will be 3%, and then raise 1% per year to get to a maximum of 10%. Now, these rules were created because we have a savings crisis in this country. And this is to get employees to save more for their retirement. And we all know that inertia tends to take place. And some people will opt out of the auto deferral because now they have to actually take action to stop the deferrals, but some will not get around to it. And so they'll keep deferring and get those automatic increases and they'll get used to it. So we expect we will see the deferral rates increase. That's kind of anticipated. That's the goal of the auto enrollment process. Now you can make an auto enrollment safe harbor 401k plan and combine those two features where we now have auto enrollment and we have safe harbor. So we have automatic enrollment, taking over for those employees, but now with the safe harbor provisions, are highly compensated can automatically now defer the maximum as well. So we kind of get both features in one plan. But this year, the maximum salary deferral is $23,500. Now, for those age 50 and older, they can do an additional $7,500. That brings us up to $31,000 salary deferral. Now, for some people, that's a lot. For some people, that's more than they can do. But for some people, that's a drop in the bucket. So if you're talking to business owners, how much do they really want to contribute to this plan? How big a deduction do they really want to get? How much cash flow do they really have to work with? Personally, how much money do they really want to save today? Or maybe what do they want to accumulate for their retirement? How many years do they have till they want to retire? Questions and can play into how we actually ultimately design a plan. So, if we're doing let's say they want the 401k plan, we make it a safe harbor so they can do their $31,000, but they want more. The maximum someone can get on an individual level in a 401k plan this year is $70,000. $77,500 when you add the catch-up, which gets added on top of that. So if they're doing a $31,000 salary deferral, how do we get to $77,500? How do we do that? We can do that in a 401k plan. These plain vanilla 401k plans, I think lots of times don't have this conversation with the employer, but right in that plan, we have the room to bring them up another $40,000+. How do we do that? 401k plans are a profit sharing plan at their base. It is a profit sharing plan with the added features of salary deferrals. So for that employer who really wants more, whether it's for themselves, for select employees, as a general employee benefit, because they want the deduction, whatever those drivers are, we can now look at the not just the salary deferral features in that 401k, but the profit sharing features as well. When that employer makes a profit sharing contribution, we can make it so it's discretionary. So every year, that employer can decide they don't want to put in anything as a profit sharing contribution, or they want to put in all the way up to the max. The maximum profit sharing contribution an employer can is 25% of the total payroll of everybody who's in the plan. So that's total employer contribution. So if we have a match or a safe harbor employer contributions, those would count towards that 25%, but whatever's left, the employer could still contribute. Now, once they contribute it, we have to have a formula as to how it gets divided among the employees. There are 4 different ways to have it divided. The simplest would be proportionate to pay. Everybody gets the same percentage. So if the employer contributed 25%, everybody will get 25% of their pay, assuming they're not exceeding our $70,000 limit or $77,500 if they're 50 or older. But maybe the employer doesn't want to give the same amount to everybody, just like some of the examples we looked at with the matching. Then we can go to a different profit sharing formula. At the other end of the spectrum is new comparability. With new comparability, we can divide our employees into groups. We can even have a different group for every employee if we wanted to. And each different group gets a different percentage of that profit sharing contribution, gets a different percentage of pay. This enables us to take that profit sharing contribution and sway it towards the people that the employer wants to benefit the most. Now, we have to give some to the employees. We don't get to ignore them, but we have control here to sway that money to favor those people that that employer wants to favor. So that's a whole nother part of the design discussion. You're talking 401k plans. If that employer wants to go beyond that $77,500, let's talk about defined benefit plans. Maybe they really want a contribution for themselves, not of $70,000, but of $300,000. Well, we can do that if we go into the world, particularly a cash balance paired with that 401k plan. And if that employer is really thinking about their personal retirement, they're thinking now, actually, I might want to retire someday, and they haven't been good about saving money. Well, in a 401k plan, you make your contributions and you don't know what you're going to have for retirement benefit. You never know. It all depends what the investment performance is on that money, gains and losses, and how much you've actually contributed over the years and how much the company has contributed. If we go to a cash balance or other type of defined benefit plan, a benefit that they will receive at retirement is defined by the plan document. Right now, in a cash balance or other kind of defined benefit plan, we can provide a benefit for someone at retirement age of 62 or 65 of a lump sum of about $3.4 million if their income is high enough to support that. That can be very, very meaningful for someone who's trying to figure out how to exit their business or have a golden handcuff on employees that they want to stay there till retirement. So there's a whole breadth of opportunity here to talk with that employer, find out what their needs, what their objectives are, what's their budget, what do they really, really want to do with this plan, not only as an employee benefit program, but as a benefit program for themselves and for those that they are really particularly wanting to benefit. And from there, we look at all the options that are available to us and do our best to design a plan within the rules. They'll meet all the requirements that will meet those objectives. But don't self-limit on the objectives. Tell them, dream away. You know, what are your objectives? What would you really like this to do? And then we will design a plan to come as close to that as possible within the rules. So with that, I think we only have about a minute left. I don't know where we are on questions, but we have another minute, so I'll take anything that we have.
Great, we do have some questions. I think we should have time for one. This one came in, Mary. What options are available if an employer wants to contribute more than the salary deferral limit?
Then we would add the profit sharing or go look at one of the defined benefit options depending on how much more they wanted to contribute.
Okay, great. And then just in addition to that, how much can each participant receive in total contribution?
The maximum that in any kind of defined contribution like a 401k plan this year is $70,000 between all the contributions to that plan per individual. Unless they're 50 and older, then they get that $7,500 catch up on top of that $70,000.
Fantastic.
Or
Thank you so
100%
much.
pay, I should add
And
that.
thank you
Yeah,
everyone
you know,
who
you can't get
attended today's webinar. Any questions we didn't get to today, we will follow up with separately. And as a reminder, please complete the survey questions that will pop up on your screen in just a minute. Everyone have a great rest of your day.